My father was buried on a Tuesday, in the rain, and by Thursday morning my brother had already called the lawyer twice to ask exactly how much money was left. The answer was, not much. Edmund Voss spent 31 years running Voss Freight and trading out of a brick warehouse by the East Docks. He moved other men's cargo, paid his drivers before he paid himself, and turned down every contract that smelled wrong. And in our city, plenty of them smelled wrong. He died at his desk at 58 with a pen still in his hand and a reputation no bank would accept as collateral. Once the debts were cleared and the warehouse was sold, the estate came to exactly $74,300 for each of his 2 sons. 31 years, Kane said when the lawyer left. My brother was 25, 4 years older than me, and he pronounced the words like a guilty verdict. 31 years, and the man couldn't even leave us the building. He left us clean money, I said. He told me once he'd rather die poor than die owing anyone an apology. Kane laughed without smiling. Then congratulations to him. He got both. That Sunday night, the 2 of us climbed the stairs to Dad's office above the warehouse for the last time. The new owner took the keys on Monday. We were there to box up 31 years of a man's life. Shipping ledgers with his small, patient handwriting, a chipped mug, a photograph of the 3 of us on the pier when I was 9. I was wrapping the photograph when the lights flickered. Not the bulbs. The air. Blue text unfolded in the middle of the room, hanging between my brother and me like light reflected off water that wasn't there. I looked at Kane. Kane looked at me. We had both seen it. Neither of us could touch it. 2 inheritances remain. 1. The genius system. A mind sharpened beyond all men. All knowledge learned tenfold. Retained forever. 2. The 2x cashback system. Complete its spending challenges, and all wealth spent shall be returned twofold. 1 choice each. The first to speak claims his path. I stood there doing what I always did, thinking. Wang. Genius compounds. Knowledge is the one asset no one can repossess. But money returned twofold if a man was careful, if a man was patient. Kane was not a patient man. The money won, he shouted at the ceiling, both hands raised like a striker who just scored. The cashback. I claim the cashback system. Confirm it. The text pulsed once. The 2x cashback system. Claimed. The genius system. Assigned. Something poured through the top of my skull like cool water. The room came into focus in a way I have no honest words for. I glanced at the open ledger on Dad's desk. Columns I'd never bothered to understand, and the numbers arranged themselves into meaning the way letters arrange into words. Routes. Margins. 3 decades of quiet mistakes and quiet brilliance. Legible to me at a glance. Kane, meanwhile, was reading something only he could see, and he had started to laugh. Starter challenge, he announced. Spend $500 within 24 hours. Reward, 1,000. He grabbed his jacket. Free money, little brother. The system pays me to live well. What does yours do? Assign homework. He spent that night at a steakhouse downtown and bought a pair of Italian shoes on the walk home. The next evening he banged on my apartment door and held up his phone. A deposit had appeared in his account, clean and documented, $1,000 exactly. Doubled, he said, eyes shining. Whatever I spend, doubled. Do you understand what I'm going to become? Someone who spends a lot, I said. Someone rich, Adam. He clapped my cheek twice, the way he did when we were kids and he'd taken something of mine. Enjoy the studying. I'll be rich by summer. I closed the door, sat down with my father's ledgers, and read them until sunrise the way other men read novels. Kane got his double dinners. I got a mind that never let go of anything. At the time, I believed I had lost the coin toss of my life. I was wrong. I had won it, and winning it is what got me killed. It took 10 years for that night in the office to reach out and stop my heart. 10 years, 1 empire, and a single cup of jasmine tea. Let me show you. Chapter 2, 10 years, 1 cup of tea. The genius system never gave me money. It gave me something slower and heavier. The ability to learn anything and to keep it. So I did what my father's son would do. I got a job. I started as a dockhand at the port terminal, the bottom rung of the industry my father had loved, and I studied it from underneath. Within 4 months, I could tell you why Pier 6 lost 11 minutes on every container turnover and exactly what those minutes cost. I wrote it up, unasked, and left the memo on the terminal manager's desk. He made me a dispatcher. A year later, I understood the port better than the men who owned it. I saved. I never borrowed, that was Dad's iron rule, and now it was mine. Never owe a man your mornings. At 23, I bought one used truck with cash and painted a name on the door. Ardent Freight. Then came the moment that built everything after it. In my second month, a cannery owner named Mr. Ishikawa double-paid an invoice, $9,400, wired twice by a clerk's mistake. Nobody would ever have caught it. I drove to his office and returned it the same afternoon. The old man looked at the check, then at me for a long time. "Your father was Edmund Voss," he said. It wasn't a question. The following week, he handed me the shipping contract for all 9 of his coastal plants, and told every supplier he knew why. That is the part people never believed about my first life. They assumed the genius system built my empire. Didn't. It built my speed. Honesty built the empire because in trade, the man everyone can trust becomes the man everyone must use. The years compressed the way years do. Ardent Freight became Ardent Logistics. I learned 4 languages, customs law, cold chain engineering, grain markets. I slept 6 hours and worked the other 18, and the system made every hour count tenfold. At 27, I bought my first ships. At 29, the papers ran the headline that ended my life, though none of us knew it yet. Adam Voss named Merchant of the Decade. Ardent Group now employs 11,000. And Kane? Kane spent. That was the cruel joke of the 2x cashback system. It did exactly what it promised, and it destroyed him anyway. The challenges kept coming. Spend 10,000 in 3 days, spend 40,000 in a week, and Kane met them the only way he knew, with restaurants and rented villas, courtside seats, watches he wore twice. The money came back doubled, and he burned the double too. Nothing he bought was still worth anything a month later. Then the challenges outgrew him. One night he had to spend 80,000 in 48 hours and only had 30 in the bank, because the rest had evaporated into a lifestyle. The blue text, he told me once, was merciless. Challenge failed. Future rewards reduced. Fail twice, and the system shrank back to pocket change like a tide going out. By year 6, my brother, the man with the money-doubling miracle, was borrowing from lenders with patient smiles and impatient friends. He came to my tower in year 8. He wanted a title, co-founder, Ardent Group, retroactive. "I'll give you something better," I said, and meant it. Operations manager, Southern Region. Real salary, real work, and every rung above it open to you. Earn it in 2 years, and I'll put you on the board myself. Kane looked at me the way you look at a stranger wearing your father's coat. "You want me to clock in? For my kid brother." He leaned over my desk. That genius system was supposed to be mine. I said the words first. "Everything you have is sitting in my chair." He walked out. I told myself he'd cool down. For 2 years, I told myself that. Then came the 10th anniversary gala for Ardent Group. 1,100 guests downstairs. And my brother, standing in the doorway of my private office in a good suit, holding 2 cups of tea, smiling like the old days before the blue light. 10 minutes, he said. No lawyers, no titles. Just brothers. I even made your favorite, Jasmine, like Dad used to. I want you to understand why I drank it. Not because I was careless. Because I had spent 10 years being careful with everything except the one thing I still wanted. My brother back. The bitterness registered on the second sip. Then my lips went numb. Then my hands, and the cup broke somewhere far away. The floor came up slowly, almost politely. Kane crouched beside me, and he was still smiling, and his eyes were wet, and that combination was the most frightening thing I have ever seen. "It was supposed to be me," he whispered. "The world was supposed to say my name. You understand? You have to understand, you took it. Strange what a mind like mine does while dying. No panique, just arithmetic. The succession plan. The 11,000 salaries. The board meeting Monday that would now be a funeral. The last thing I learned in my first life was the taste of jasmine. Then someone tore the darkness open like a curtain, and I was on my feet, gasping, in a small room that smelled of rain and cardboard, holding a photograph of 3 people on a pier. My father's office, the boxes, the chipped mug, my hands, young, uncalloused, no scar on the left thumb from the winch accident in year 2. The phone in my pocket said it was the Sunday after the funeral. 10 years ago. Tonight. And in the middle of the room, blue light was already unfolding like reflected water, beginning a speech I had heard once before. While across the boxes, my brother stood watching it. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. Kane was smiling. Chapter 3, the second choice. 2 inheritances remain. 1. The genius system. A mind sharpened beyond all men. All knowledge learned 10. Mine. Kane's voice cracked across the office like a whip. I claim it. The genius system. Confirm it. Confirm it. The text hadn't even finished. The second option, his beloved cashback, had not yet been spoken aloud into the world. And my brother had just claimed the other one by name. Understand what that meant. There was exactly one way for Kane Voss to know on this night, standing in these boxes, that a second option was coming and that the first one was worth stealing. He had lived this before. He had watched me build an empire with the genius system for 10 years, hated me for it, poisoned me at my own gala. And then he had woken up here in the past exactly as I had. And this was his first act. Not checking whether the murder had somehow been undone. Not falling to his knees at a second chance. His first breath in a new life, and he spent it making sure I could never rise again. The genius system. Claimed. The 2x cashback system. Assigned. I felt nothing pour through my skull this time. Instead, small blue text settled quietly at the edge of my vision, visible to me alone, like a ledger waiting to be opened. Kane exhaled and rolled his shoulders as the genius took hold of him, and I watched his eyes flick to Dad's open ledger the way mine once had. Reading it, drinking it. Then he looked at me, and I had 1 second to choose the rest of my life. I could tell him I remembered. Watch the smile die. 2 reborn brothers, cards on the table, war from day 1. Or I could be what he needed me to be. That's not fair, I said, and I put a whine in it. The whine of a 21-year-old who just lost a coin toss. You didn't even let it finish. What am I supposed to do with a spending system? I have $74,000, Kane. The smile that spread across my brother's face was the most honest thing he ever showed me. Relief, contempt, victory. He crossed the room and clapped my cheek. Twice. Then spend it slowly, little brother. He picked up his jacket. At the door he paused, unable to resist. And hey, try not to gamble Dad's money away. I don't gamble, I said. I only buy things. He laughed all the way down the stairs. The moment the warehouse door boomed shut below, I sat down in my father's chair, alone with a system my brother had once starved to death, and I began to write the rules that he had never bothered to learn. Rule 1. No one learns what I have. Visible wealth is what got me killed. This time the world would see a spender, and never a fortune. Rule 2. I never borrow. Dad's law. A man in debt fails challenges on other men's schedules. Rule 3. I only spend on what remains. This was the entire secret, the one Kane never found in 10 years of double dinners. The system paid me back twice what I spent, and I still kept whatever I bought. Spend on a steak, and you're left with double the money and nothing else. Spend on a truck, a warehouse, a man's wages, a building, and you're left with double the money and the asset still working, still earning. Kane had used a money-doubling engine to double his garbage. I was going to use it to buy the ground the future stood on. And I had one advantage even the genius system couldn't give my brother. I had already lived the next 10 years. I knew which port would expand. I knew which districts would triple. I knew every mistake in his character in order like sheet music. Rule 4. Keep reserves. Never fail. The system never failed Kane. Kane failed the system. As if it had been listening, the ledger in the corner of my vision unfolded. First challenge. Spend $50,000 within 48 hours. Reward, $100,000. 48 hours. I had $74,300 and a decade of foreknowledge. I nearly laughed. By noon the next day, I was shaking hands with Sal Moreno, a hauler 2 months from retirement, whose 3 box trucks I had once tried to buy in my first life and lost to a competitor by a week. This time I was early. $47,500 cash, and Sal threw in his client list because I let him keep the company name on the mud flaps. The last $2,500 went somewhere better. The new owner of my father's warehouse hadn't moved in yet, and he was very happy to lease the building to a polite young man for exactly that much per month. I stood on the loading dock where I'd learned to ride a bike, keys in my hand, as the text pulsed. Challenge complete. $100,000 credited. The deposit arrived clean and documented. Dividends from a trust one had never opened. Taxes somehow pre-calculated. By the second deposit, I stopped asking how. The system kept its own books. Do the arithmetic with me because I did it on that dock about 40 times. 3 days into my second life, $124,300 in cash, 3 trucks with contracts attached, and the keys to my father's building. Kane had once used this power to double a dinner. I intended to double a coastline. One more purchase before midnight, and it wasn't a truck. His name was Marcus Hale, ex-military, quiet as furniture, the best clothes protection man on the coast in 10 years' time, currently unemployed and unknown. I hired him for cash and gave him only one standing order that made him raise an eyebrow. Whenever I can't see my brother, I said, you can, because I had lived the story once. I knew exactly how it ended the day I got careless. At midnight, the ledger opened again, and this time I smiled before I even read it. Challenge. Spend $200,000 within 7 days. Reward. $400,000. The tide was coming in. Chapter 4, The Useless Brother. The next 2 years of my second life ran on a ladder only I could see. Spend $200,000 within 7 days. Done. 6 refrigerated warehouses on the East Docks. Bought for scrap value from men who didn't know the cold chain boom was coming. I knew. I'd lived it. Spend $500,000 within 5 days. Done. 14 crumbling buildings in the Ferry District, 2 years before the city would announce the transit line that tripled them. Spend $2 million. Spend $5 million. Spend $12 million. Spend $30 million. Done. 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 Every challenge paid double, and this was the entire game. I still owned everything I'd bought. The money doubled, and the assets stayed, and the assets earned, and the reserves meant I never once failed. Moreno Freight grew from 3 trucks to 90. The warehouses filled. The rents flowed. The tide never went out. None of it had my name on it. It all belonged to a quiet holding company called Amana, an old word for trust, whose sole visible director was a scrupulous, silver-haired lawyer named Mr. Adeyemi, and whose actual owner, buried under 3 layers of paperwork, was a useless young man nobody took seriously. Because that was the other half of my work, being useless in public. I bought the cars. I bought the watches. I bought a cliffside house with a garage like a showroom, and I made sure I was photographed doing it. Visible wealth with no visible income, no company, no title, no office. The city drew the obvious conclusion because I drew it for them. The younger Voss boy is burning his father's money, and when it's gone, he'll be nothing. Camouflage is cheap when other people knit it for you. And no one knitted faster than my brother. Kane's rise was real. I'll give the genius system that. Voss Global launched 8 months after the funeral. Import, export, logistics. My father's industry. My industry. I sat in my car outside his launch event and watched the press applaud his visionary instincts. And I recognized every single move. The cold chain pivot. The port fee arbitrage. The coastal cannery contracts. He wasn't a visionary. He was performing my first life from memory. Faster, louder, and greedier, and only one man alive could see the plagiarism. But speed costs. I had built Ardent on patience and clean money. Kane didn't have 10 years of humility in him, so he bought speed with a man named Dorian Wexler. Smiling capital, expensive terms, the kind of paper our father would have burned in the parking lot. Kane signed personal guarantees to get it. He squeezed suppliers to 20 cents on the dollar because his genius told him they had no alternative. He skipped whatever slowed him down: inspections, certifications, apologies. Genius sees what it looks at. My brother only ever looked up. The family saw exactly what each of us showed them. At Uncle Raymond's table that autumn, Kane held court for an hour. The new floors he was leasing in Caldwell Tower, the magazine cover, the 11-figure trajectory. Then my cousin Theo, 19 and honest, turned to me. "What is it you do all day, Adam?" "I shop," I said. The table roared. Kane lifted his cup, delighted. "To my little brother, living proof that Dad's money skipped a generation." Laughter all around. He leaned back, gracious in victory, and offered the family his expert analysis. "That cashback system's a trap, by the way. I looked into it. It doubles your pocket change until the challenges outrun your pockets. He'll be broke by 30. He believed it completely because it was a confession. That was precisely how he had failed it, in a life only the two of us remembered. My brother's own past was the blindfold over his brilliant eyes, and he had tied it there himself. "You're probably right," I said, and passed him the bread. There was one part of the ladder I never showed anyone, and I'll tell you because it mattered later. The system, it turned out, did not distinguish between buying and giving. A challenge was a challenge. Spending was spending. So the ladder built a pediatric clinic in the Harbor District. It endowed 400 trade scholarships for dockworkers' sons. It paid off the equipment debts of every small hauler who'd ever kept his word to Moreno Freight. I want to be honest with you. I would have given anyway. My father tithed quietly his whole life, out of a thin wallet, and I am his son. But I won't pretend I didn't smile every time the ledger paid me double for it. Somewhere in the mechanics of that strange blue light, generosity was the single highest yielding asset I owned. And one acquisition at a time, without ever saying his name, I bought the ground my brother stood on. The shipping line Voss Global chartered, Amana owned it. The bonded warehouses he rented, Amana owned them. Two of his three biggest suppliers, the ones he squeezed to 20 cents, Amana quietly recapitalized both, and their grateful owners sold me controlling stakes and told no one, exactly as the purchase terms required. By the spring I turned 24, my brother's empire was a magnificent ship, and I owned the water. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday at 5:58 in the morning, the ledger unfolded across my vision with the largest number it had ever shown me, and I sat up in the dark and felt my pulse in my teeth. Challenge: spend $100 million within 24 hours. Reward: $200 million. 24 hours. $100 million. For 2 years, in a locked drawer of my desk, I had kept a handwritten list titled someday, for this exact morning. I called Hale. "Bring the car," I said, "and call Adeyemi. Today's the day." Chapter 5, 100 million in a day. At 6:41 that morning, while Hale drove me through the waking city, my brother was on breakfast television. He looked immaculate. The genius system had given him flawless recall and a closet full of the right answers, and the host adored him. Near the end came the question Kane never could resist planting. "You come from a freight family? Your brother works in the business too?" Kane laughed his warm public laugh.
Adam?
No, somebody has to keep the boutiques in business. The host laughed with him. "Look, I love my brother, but some men build, and some men buy watches." I checked the first item off my list and turned the screen off. He was right about the watch, at least. I was wearing a good one. I wanted to look serious for the largest shopping day of my life. 7:40 a.m. Harbor Point Container Terminal. $58 million. The Aldana family had run the coast's only privately held container terminal for 2 generations, and I knew 2 things they didn't. First, in 14 months, the Port Authority would announce the northern expansion, and this unfashionable strip of cranes and concrete would triple in value. I'd watched it happen once already. Second, my brother's genius had reached the same conclusion by pure calculation. Voss Global's fee costs told him to own a terminal, and his bid had landed on the Aldana's table 3 days before mine. That was the snag waiting for me in their boardroom at 7:40 in the morning. Old Mr. Aldana, arms folded, and a rival offer $4 million higher than mine. signed by Dorian Wexler on behalf of Voss Global. Their number is bigger, Aldana said. Their number is borrowed, I said. Financing contingency, 60-day close, and a buyer who squeezes every supplier he's ever signed. Ask the canneries what a Voss Global handshake is worth. My offer is cash. It closes at 5 o'clock today, and every crane operator on that pier keeps his job and his pension. Call Mr. Adeyemi's last 9 sellers and ask if Amana has ever chiseled a single one of them. He did call. All 9. At 11:15 a.m. we signed, and a family business my brother meant to strip for parts became the anchor of everything I was building instead. Kane had taught me something in 2 lives of watching him. Speed impresses, but trust closes. 1 p.m. Caldwell Tower. $33 million. 51 stories of blue glass in the financial district, and on the top of it, in steel letters 9 feet tall, Voss Global. My brother leased 5 floors and the naming rights and, in the manner of men everywhere who confuse a lease with a legacy, told interviewers he was building from Caldwell Tower, as though the building were his. The actual owners were a pension fund in a hurry to rebalance. Adeyemi had been courting them for a year. At 1 o'clock I bought the tower under my brother's name, every floor of it, including his, and the steel letters became, in strict legal fact, decorations on my property. My brother now paid me rent. He simply didn't know my name yet. 4:15 p.m. Mercy General Hospital. $6 million. The chairman of the hospital board wept, which embarrassed us both. The new pediatric wing had been stalled at half-built for 3 years. The gift that finished it came from Amana Holdings with 2 conditions. No press release, and 1 name in bronze above the doors, the Edmund Voss Children's Wing. My father moved other men's cargo his whole life and died at his desk with nothing but his name. I intended for that name to outlast every steel letter my brother rented. 8 p.m. The yards. $3 million. The last $3 million went out in small pieces before dark. Signing bonuses and certified tool sets for 300 new apprentices across Moreno Freight, the terminal, and the warehouses. Dockworkers' sons, mostly. A few of their fathers had worked for mine. Money spent on machines depreciates. Money spent on loyal men compounds, and no rival can buy it out from under you at any price. At 11:58 p.m., alone in my father's old office above the warehouse, I never moved out of it. Some ground you keep, the ledger pulsed blue in the dark. Challenge complete. $200 million credited. I sat with my father's chipped mug and did the arithmetic I had been postponing all day. The terminal, the tower, the buildings, the fleets, the shipping line, the warehouses, the stakes, the reserves, and now this, the largest single deposit the system had ever paid me, arriving clean and documented from a trust no one could trace. Somewhere in the past 2 years, quietly, the useless brother had become the wealthiest man on this coast. Just over $1 billion, buried under 3 layers of paper. In public, I was a punchline with a nice garage. In private, I owned the punchline, the garage, the pier, the tower, and the water my brother's magnificent ship sailed on. I want to tell you I felt triumph. Mostly I felt the clock, because I had lived with Kane Voss for 2 lifetimes, and I knew that empires built on squeezed men and borrowed speed do not land softly. They come down. Mine came down in my first life with poison in a teacup. His would come down the ordinary way. Took 2 more weeks. The cargo was pharmaceutical, temperature critical, high margin. Exactly the contract Kane's genius loved. The certified refrigeration inspection would have delayed the sailing by 4 days. So Voss Global's chairman had waived it with a signature, the way he waived everything slow. Somewhere at sea, a compressor Kane had been told about failed. $40 million of medicines spoiled in the dark. A hospital network sued, and the insurers, reading the waiver with delight, walked away clean. Wexler did not walk away. Wexler read the same documents, smelled blood in the water he had sold my brother, and called every note Kane had ever personally guaranteed. Voss Global had 30 days to find $400 million or a buyer. On the 9th day, my phone rang at dawn. Adeyemi's voice was very calm, the way it only got when history was on the line. Voss Global's bankers came to us an hour ago, he said. They are asking whether Amana Holdings would consider a rescue. I looked out my father's window at the cranes turning over the harbor, every one of them mine, and I felt both of my lives converge on a single point of light. Tell them Amana is interested, I said. And Adeyemi. Make sure the owner attends the signing personally. My brother had just asked me to buy him. He simply didn't know my name yet. Chapter 6, The Buyer. They held the signing on the 40th floor of Caldwell Tower, which I appreciated, because it meant my brother's ruin was scheduled to take place inside my property. Voss Global's board sat on one side of the table like men at their own funeral. The bankers sat at the end, neutral as weather. Dorian Wexler lounged near the window, entirely relaxed. He was getting paid either way, and men like Wexler are only loyal to that. And at the head of the table sat Kane, gaunt and immaculate, his genius visibly running scenarios behind his eyes, still believing a scenario existed in which he won. We were told, Kane said to Adeyemi, that Amana's owner would attend personally. I don't negotiate with lawyers. You won't have to, Adeyemi said, and opened the door. I have replayed the next 10 seconds many times. My brother saw me, and his first reaction, his honest, immediate reaction, was to laugh. Adam. He looked around the table, inviting everyone in on it. Gentlemen, my little brother. He's lost, presumably. The boutiques are on street level. Nobody laughed with him. Adeyemi slid a single page across the table, the schedule of Amana Holdings' assets. And I watched the genius system, the miracle my brother had stolen twice, do its terrible work in real time. His eyes went down the page, and 2 years of careful blindness assembled itself in seconds. The shipping line he chartered, the bonded warehouses he rented, his 2 biggest suppliers, Harbor Point Terminal, the bid that beat him, the pension fund's quiet sale of 1 Caldwell Tower. He looked up, at last, at the ceiling, as if he could see through 51 floors to the steel letters on the roof. The tower, he said quietly. Every floor, I said. Your rent has been very punctual. Thank you. What followed took 90 minutes, and I will give you only the terms, because the terms were the point. Amana acquired Voss Global whole. Every creditor 100 cents on the dollar. Wexler, paid out in full and shown the door. His kind of money was leaving this company forever. Every supplier my brother had squeezed to 20 cents. Made whole at full contract value, my father's rates backdated. Every warehouse worker and clerk and driver. Kept. And Kane's own stake, after his personal guarantees finished devouring him, came to almost exactly nothing. You'll be removed as chairman today, I said. Then, because I am my father's son, I made the offer. Operations manager, Southern Region. Real salary, real work, every rung above it open to you. Earn it, and I'll put you on the board myself. The words were not an accident. They were the same words, in the same order, that I had spoken across my desk in another life, in year 8, to a brother who spat on it. And for half a second something moved behind Kane's eyes, a question he could not ask me without answering it first. Then it was gone, burned off by rage. He stood, buttoned his jacket with shaking hands, and left his company without signing so much as a farewell. The press did the rest. Punchline and no more. Ran the kindest headline. Useless Voss brother revealed as richest man on the coast. Overnight, the city inverted. Uncle Raymond called, wonderstruck and apologetic. Cousin Theo sent me a single message. I knew the watches were a bit, which remains my favorite review of a 2-year performance. I did not celebrate. I was waiting for Hale. His report came 8 days later, delivered standing, in the flat voice he saves for things that matter. My brother had sold his watches and his car. He was, for the first time in 2 lives, actually broke. He had stopped appearing anywhere. And on Thursday, under a name that wasn't his, he had visited a chemical supplier across the bay and purchased a small quantity of something with no honest use. The same thing he had bought once before, in a life only 2 men remembered. There it was. I sat with it for a long evening, and I want to be honest about the arithmetic, because this is the chapter where I could have become something I refused to become. I could have handed Hale's file to the police and hoped. I could have lived the next 50 years behind Hale's shoulders, tasting every cup twice. Or worse, I could have solved it the way Kane solved things and let the sea have its rumor. No, my father's son does not buy his peace with blood. and he does not rent it with fear. But a man who has decided to kill you once will decide faster the second time, and I had one advantage left that I had never spent. Kane still did not know that I remembered, which meant I, and only I, could choose the room it happened in, the hour, the witnesses, and the ending. So I filed a quiet report, made 3 arrangements, and then I sent my brother an invitation. The old office, Sunday night. No lawyers, no titles. Just brothers. I'll make the tea. Chapter 7. The tea was jasmine. It rained on Sunday night, the way it had rained the night we buried our father, and I took that as the world keeping its accounts tidy. The old office above the warehouse looked almost as it had that night. The desk, the chipped mug, the photograph of 3 people on a pier, back on its shelf where it belonged. What the room also held and did not show were 2 of Hale's men behind the false wall of the record room, 2 plainclothes detectives in the loading bay below. My quiet report, it turned out, had been taken very seriously, and 3 small cameras with a perfect view of my father's desk. I set out 2 cups and put the kettle on. Jasmine. Kane arrived at 8, gray and thin, shaking rain off a coat that had seen better lifetimes. He stood in the doorway a moment, looking at the room, and something in his face genuinely broke. I want that on the record too, because whatever else is true, some part of that was real. You kept it, he said. The office. Some ground you keep. He gave me the speech on the way to the chair. You win. I see it now. I was owed nothing. Dad would be proud of you and ashamed of me. Let's start over. Let's be brothers again. It was a good speech. The genius system writes excellent speeches. I poured the water and set the pot between us, and then, as arranged, my phone rang. Adeyemi? I said, glancing at it. 2 minutes. Terminal paperwork. I stepped out onto the landing, and I stood in the dark with the phone against my ear and nobody on it, and I gave my brother 90 seconds alone with 2 cups of tea. When I came back, the tea was poured. Kane slid my cup toward me across our father's desk with both hands, careful as a priest. Jasmine, he said, and smiled. Like Dad used to. I lifted the cup and looked at my brother over the rim, and I let the steam touch my face, and I did not drink. You remembered my favorite, I said. You always do. I set the cup down and turned it slowly on the wood. You brought the same poison, too. You repeat yourself, Kane. The room went very still. My brother's smile stayed where it was. Forgotten. Same. I died slower than you probably planned, I said. Slow enough to hear you. It was supposed to be me. The world was supposed to say my name. You were crying when you said it. That was the strangest part. I spent my whole first death trying to work out whether the tears were for me or the applause. I watched 2 lifetimes land on him at once. The color left his face in a single tide. The second choice, he whispered. The office, you claimed nothing, you whined, you. Before the light even finished, I said the name of a system I couldn't have known. And you were standing right there and you knew. You confessed in the first 5 seconds of your second life, I said. I just let you finish. He came across the desk with his hands. Not the tea, rage is honest that way, and he did not reach me. The record room wall opened and Hale's men had him on the floorboards before the cups stopped rattling. Held down, face against the wood of the desk our father died at. The detectives came up the stairs without hurrying. They photographed the pot, bagged both cups, and drew from my brother's coat sleeve a small glass vial, mostly empty. And then Kane Voss, for the first time in 2 lives, told a room full of people the whole truth. He was dead. He was screaming it at the detectives, at Hale, at the cameras he hadn't found. I killed him already. 10 years. The gala. Ask him about the gala, he remembers. We came back. Both of us ask him. The detectives looked at me. I looked at my brother, held down and shrieking a confession to a murder that existed in no file, no year, no world but ours. I have no idea what he means, I said quietly. It is the only lie I told in my second life, and I have made my peace with it, because every true word available to me would have followed him into the padded room. They took him down the stairs. The rain swallowed the sirens. I sat alone with 2 cold cups of jasmine, in the office where all of it began twice, and I did not enjoy it. Write that down somewhere. I did not enjoy it. The trial was brief, 3 cameras and a vile make for short arguments, and the doctors got him before the sentence did. Attempted murder, secure psychiatric custody. He tells them he has lived twice. They write it down. I pay for the best care in the country, anonymously, through Amana. That isn't forgiveness. Call it a down payment on it. I'm still deciding about the rest, and I visit twice a year, and he always asks how I knew. Someday I may even tell him. As for the rest, we renamed it all in the end. Not Amana, not Ardent, not Voss Global. The Edmund Voss Group. The port expansion was announced 14 months later, to the day, and Harbor Point tripled, exactly as an old memory said it would. The children's wing opened in spring. The bronze above the doors says a freight man's name, and it will say it long after every rented steel letter on every tower comes down. At Uncle Raymond's table last month, Theo asked me, grinning, older now, what it is I actually do all day. Same answer, I said. I shop. People ask me what the system was. I still don't know, and I've stopped pretending to. Here is what I do know. Across 2 lives, my brother and I held both miracles between us, the mind and the money once each, and the miracles decided nothing. They only paid out what each of us already was at double the rate. Last night, alone in the old office, the ledger unfolded in the dark for the first time in months. Challenge. Spend $1 billion within 30 days. Reward. $2 billion. I laughed, put the kettle on. Not Jasmine. I've moved on, and reached for a pen and a fresh sheet of paper, and at the top of it I wrote the word someday. Below me the tide came in over the harbor, and the cranes turned, and all of it was mine, and I had time.